Thanks for joining us today. I think Tim had a good idea about waiting a few minutes because of these announcements that keep popping in can be pretty disruptive. But on the other hand, we've got a lot of good stuff to talk about. Everyone's on mute, and I'm going to switch my view to showing the chat. So if you're having any, first of all, could somebody just unmute themselves and let me know that they can hear me?
I can hear you.
All
I can hear
right.
you.
Thank you.
I hear.
Okay, sounds like we're good in the audio department. So welcome again. As I said, let me see. I want to stop sharing my PowerPoint so that you can. I think you can see me now for a second, just to get an idea of who's talking to you for the next few minutes here. My name is Judi Pfancuff. I'm the Director of User Adoption and Communications at Bennett Adelson. And we're really happy to have you here today while we share some thoughts and hear your thoughts about how to go about improving user adoption of Microsoft Teams. We're really focused on sharing practical ideas, things that you can put into practice yourselves, and of course things that we would love to help you with if that's the way things work out for you as well. But we believe you can do an awful lot on your own, and you should. So let's get right into I'll go back to the PowerPoint and get into the presentation. So the first thing I wanted to do was be sure we were all on the same page about the focus for today. So we don't really have, I don't have prepared content on, oh, you know what, I skipped over something. I think I'll go back. I'm going to stop sharing again. Just what I want to share for just a second actually is what my meeting space looks like. I'm not positive. I assume everyone has pretty good familiarity with Teams, but I just wanted to point out that later I'll be referring to the chat screen. Right now it's filled up with a lot of information about people joining. But if we scroll up to the top, you can see I posted a link here, and I'll be referring to that in a little while, and I'll be posting another link later. So all you need to do to see the chat is point your cursor anywhere in the meeting space. The toolbar comes up, and just click the show or hide conversation button to bring that up. Okay, now let's go back to the PowerPoint, and I'm going to stop sharing that and start sharing my second screen, and I think we can minimize the bouncing around for a while now. Okay, so let me turn my page. So these are your users, right? Some of them look enthusiastic, some of them look pretty skeptical. And these are the folks that we have in the back of our minds as we talk about Teams adoption. Teams is a great technology, but some of your users are not necessarily convinced, right, going in. I want to point out that I won't be talking about
Gary Charavelli
is now joining.
Won't be talking about technical implementation today. If you do have technical questions, we'll ask you to hold those. We might have time to address some of them at the end of the session, or we can put you in touch with somebody here at Bennett Adelson who can do a better job than I can with technical matters. But what we are going to talk about is the challenging job of getting users to not only use this great new platform for collaboration, but to use it well. So what do we mean by that? one interesting piece of data that I came across from the Standish Group. You may be familiar with them. They do a lot of research in technology implementation. They're an independent IT research advisory firm. They've been around since the 1980s. And their research has shown that just 5% of the capabilities contained in packaged software, which Microsoft Teams certainly is actually used by the average user. So your average user is using about 5% of the capability of the applications that you are providing for them. And as far as we're concerned, that's not acceptable. We assume that's not acceptable to you either. We believe you can increase that figure substantially by incorporating an effective adoption strategy into your implementation. So that's what we're here to talk about today. So really what it comes down to is all of you in this space are going to have to become change managers. And what we thought we would do to kick off today is to look at some of the basics, the fundamental models and theories about change management. It's a discipline that's gotten a lot more attention recently, and I think it's because organizations are getting more and more complex. 10 years ago, change management was it was out there, but it wasn't the everyday term, and it wasn't something that people were actually investing a lot in. But today, if you work for a company of, say, 10,000 employees, in other words, a big company, chances are almost 100% that somebody in that organization is certified in change management. It's probably somebody in the HR department. But a lot of technology practitioners are also becoming interested in change management. And the good news is that you don't have to be in a big company or have a certification in order to put the tools of change management into practice. It takes one main thing, I think, and that is discipline and an understanding of the importance and the value that it can bring. But it does not take certification to do a good job with change management, in my opinion. So one of the best known and best researched change management models is published by a company called Prosci. Prosci is the partner that Microsoft chose 10 years ago when they decided to adopt a third-party change management methodology. And I've had the chance to talk to a few people at Microsoft about this, why they chose Prosci, and quite simply because Prosci is really evidence-based. They've done a tremendous amount of research on change management, and Microsoft really felt that they had the best approach. So they've been working together for 10 years, and that is a long time. They must be doing something right. I've had some Prosci training myself. I'm not actually certified, but I've worked for a big company that had a number of people who were certified in the Prosci models, and have had a lot of experience using the tools over the years, and they work. So before we take a look at some of the basics from the Prosci approach, I thought it would be interesting to do a little baseline assessment of the folks here with us today to see kind of where you're at in terms of some of the basic elements of change management. So I'm going to switch, actually I'll just bring it up. Here's my browser, here we go. I'll just drag it up here. So I mentioned that in the, in the chat section of the meeting space, there's a link that I posted the other day. And as I said, you'll have to scroll up to the top. I posted it before people started joining. So if you want to go ahead and click that link and let me know in the chat or take yourself off mute for a second to let me know if you're having any trouble. But that link should go straight to a form in Microsoft Forms that you'll be able to participate in. So what I'm showing you now is the administrator view, if you will, in Microsoft Forms. Forms is part of Office 365, or maybe it's M365. I'm not sure if it's actually part of Office, but anyhow, it's browser-based, and you manage your forms from a page that looks like this. We're doing participant poll 1 right now. And if the link is working for you, you can go ahead and take a look and start answering questions. I've clicked on the responses tab so that we'll be able to watch as people start answering questions. We'll be able to see what folks are telling us about how change management stands in their organizations.
So there are some comments about
I see
people
them.
not being able to access. I don't know how to get to it either. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So I'll go ahead and repost. So I'm making it the newest entry in the meeting chat. So let me know if you have any trouble. Oh, I see nobody was able to see it. Okay, good. Well, everybody should be able to see it now, hopefully.
It says you do not have permissions.
Oh, this was not. Let's try again. It changed itself. I didn't know it would do that. Let me know if this one works.
It works. Just
All
refresh
right.
the page.
Great. Yeah, I had it set up so that anyone could respond, and when I opened it today, it was reset back to only people within my organization. So should work for everyone now. So these are just 5 questions. And I should say, sometimes questions like this are hard to answer. If you're in a large, complicated organization, it just kind of depends, right, on what group you're thinking about. And it can be really hard and really maybe not even a good idea to try to answer for the whole organization at large. So if you want to, you can go ahead and think about a more homogeneous group that you're familiar with. Think about maybe your own department, or your corporate function, or whatever makes sense to you, that will make it easiest for you to answer the questions. So responses are rolling in. Anthony, do you know how? Oh, 42 people on the call. Okay. So we won't wait until we have 42, but we'll wait until we have a good number before we start looking at our responses. So we're up to about 2/3 of you have submitted. So I'll go ahead and start talking again. And first thing I want to say is the reason that I asked these 5 questions. If I switch back, well, maybe I won't do that yet. These 5 questions hit on the 5 things that ProSci's research show have the biggest influence on successful implementation of change. Okay, I think maybe I will switch back to the PowerPoint. Here we go. So number one, and these are in priority order. Number one is active executive sponsorship. So who knew that those guys were so important to change being successful, but they really are. The number two finding was that dedicating resources to change management was the second largest contributor. Number three was use of a structured change management process. Number four was involving employees in the process of the change. And number five was frequent open communications. This was kind of a hard thing to swallow for me. I've been a communicator for more years than I care to count. And I would have thought communications would have been number one, but it's not. It's that executive sponsorship. So let's go back and look at your responses and see what we have. So you guys are either really lucky or geniuses when it comes to enlisting support from senior leadership, because the majority of you have that, and that is great. The second category here, the second possible response was that some managers are asking for teams, but there's really little interest at the senior level. So those folks have a different challenge. And if you're not sure, then this tells you that this is an area that you should think about and investigate and find out, because it's important. Okay, number two, do you expect to have dedicated staff with change management experience to support your efforts? Most people are saying no, they don't expect to. So that's something to think about. Think about how you could accomplish that with your available resources, because it really can make a big contribution to your success. But a pretty good percentage say that they do have that, so that's great. The third question, are you using a structured process? And we actually have quite a few people, almost half of you say that you're doing that, so that's awesome. Are you including ways to for users to actively participate? This is great. So this is something that 3/4 of you are planning to do, and that's terrific. And likewise, it looks like a good emphasis on communications. So we're preaching to the choir here to a large extent. So that's good for me to know. Okay, let's move on then. And this is the Prosci change management model. You'll hear it referred to as ADKAR. If you talk to Microsoft people about change management, it won't be long before somebody says ADKAR. And if you've heard it and didn't know what it was referring to, it's this acronym. These are basically four states of being when it comes to change. And they're on a continuum. Okay, so we start at the left with awareness and building across to actually implement our change through desire, knowledge, ability, and reinforcement. And I need to turn my page to see what else I was going to say about this slide. Oh, I guess you might be interested to know this model was originally published in 2003, so it's been around for a while. Okay, so I mentioned that it's a continuum, and this is how the 5 elements of ADKAR line up against kind of a progression against time. So your current state is where you are before the change is really underway. There might be some little rumblings of change in the current state, and there probably will be as people begin to develop the awareness of a need for change or the awareness of an ability to change. In a lot of organizations, we're finding that people, especially early adopters, are very well aware of teams and aware of starting to become aware of what it can do for them. And in fact, a lot of them are starting to express the desire to do that. So that's probably happening in some of your organizations as well. People are saying, when am I going to get it? And what's taking so long? In the transition stage, then people start to develop the knowledge that they need in order to embrace the change and the ability to do it. So knowledge and ability are very closely related, and they both are addressed in large measure by training. And then in the future state, the ongoing state, we talk about reinforcement. And here, a couple of years from now, or hopefully a lot less than that, let's say 9 to 12 months from now, Teams is pretty well established in your organization. You're still going to have people who aren't using it as well as they might, and you're going to have new people joining your organization all the time, and the need to continue to reinforce the further adoption of Teams will, literally never go away. So what we recommend is, with this, thinking in terms of this model, one of the first things you really should do as you start to enter into an adoption program is to do some analysis to understand what change state your target population is really in. And again, depending on how large and complex your organization is, you might have a number of target populations that are in different states along this continuum. And in order to be effective with your efforts, you want to understand as well as you can where they are in terms of, you might have, there are a lot of different ways to slice and dice an organization, right? You might decide that you have 6 different audiences. You might have 20 different audiences. I recommend trying to stay closer down to the 6 audiences end of the spectrum, but it's not always possible to get that close. And so each of those audiences may have a different, maybe in a different state. And in fact, I think I'm going to go ahead and share, if I can find it here, a tool that we use and that we'll be happy to share with you after the webinar today. And this is just an Excel workbook that has 4 tabs that are all different templates related to an overall change management plan. And this first one is stakeholder assessment. So what we recommend you do, and this one has some kind of dummy content filled in. The blue text is part of the template. The black text is example of how it might look when it gets filled in. So I should freeze these panes so we can look at this when you're not familiar. So it didn't work. I grabbed the wrong one. Okay, so for example, let's take an executive group. Let's take our vice presidents. We want to think about what speaks to them. All right, what kind of reasons for adopting Teams might be compelling to them. And in this case, we talked about reducing costs, increasing efficiency and effectiveness. And then on each of the ADKAR components, we are ranking them, 1 being they've made no progress toward the change, and 5 being they've successfully embraced the change. And so we're ranking each of these audiences on where they are against each of the ADKAR components. So we're saying that the VPs are only vaguely aware, but down here we have our business relationship managers, and we're saying that awareness is strong. for most of them, that they could undoubtedly use some additional messaging and talking points and so forth, but they've got a good solid awareness right now, even before our project starts. Their desire, for many of them, is strong, but in our pretend organization here, we're saying it varies quite a bit across different parts of the organization. We're saying that their knowledge is probably stronger than almost any of our audiences. Their ability, and likewise, so they're pretty solid, and we can start talking to them and reinforcing knowledge and ability. Whereas with the VPs, we first need to get their attention, and we need to convince them that they should even care about teams. So it's a totally different situation, and so on for a number of different audiences. In this case, I think we have about 8 or 10, and that was, making an effort to keep it to a minimum, but sometimes that's what you have to do. Okay, I should take a breath and ask, does anybody have any questions at this stage about, kind of how do you analyze your audience? I will say that in terms of, well, actually, what I should do probably is go back to my notes, because yeah, I don't want to skip over anything. I'm going to go too far on tactics before we've really talked about, kind of the concept here. So anyhow, I think we've already said that you understanding the stage that your key users are in is going to be really important to developing your adoption efforts. And so let's go back to think back on the results of our survey. Depending on your answers to those 5 questions, your change management approach will undoubtedly involve different tactics. For example, if you are lucky enough to work for an organization where users are already aware and so forth, then you're going to talk to those users differently than you do if you are starting from ground zero with virtually no awareness. So let's take another survey. And actually, I guess I just should say on in terms of questions and so forth, please feel free to take yourself off mute and ask a question if I'm if I'm moving forward and you're wishing that we had had a chance to talk a little more about any subject. So I'm going to, if there aren't any questions, I'm going to go ahead and we'll do our second poll here. Let's make sure it's set that anyone can respond. And I will go ahead and paste the link for that in the meeting. Notes. Oh, good. And there are some comments here that I can look at. So here's the link for the second survey. And let's let me respond to your comments. So Tally asked, do we use Prosci's assessment tool to do this analysis? We simplified their assessment tool, and it's a great question. One of the reasons that we called the webinar today a practical approach is that we feel like, and again, this is, debatable, but I feel that the Prosci approach can get pretty heavy in terms of just the workload to use their approach in its pure form. So what I've done and what you can do, they share a lot of their tools and resources on their website. And we definitely started with their material, but we simplified it. So this next question from Robin is, he's saying, we currently use Skype for conference calls and chat. Once Skype goes away, we will be forced to use Teams. I think that makes our adoption a little different. We're actually working with a big client right now who's doing exactly that. It's a Skype to Teams transition. They're doing that before they're really ready to roll out Teams with full functionality, and it is different. It is, your people may not be aware and may not have the desire, but you've got a much more compelling message, which is you have to. So it definitely changes the messaging, and it's definitely different. Oh, okay. So Patrick says, we too were forced into Teams when Staff Hub became Shifts. We're struggling to find any additional features, and our power users are frustrated by some of Teams shortcomings. Little details by being able to use the tab key inside of Excel in Teams. Wow, I haven't even run across that one. One piece of advice I would have is, as you learn about things that frustrate people and as you develop workarounds, find a way to communicate those. For example, when I work in Teams with documents, like spreadsheets or even Word documents, I never open them with Teams. I open them with the native client. So if anybody's interested, we can do a quick demo and show you what we mean by that. But it is true that opening documents or files inside Teams does lead to frustration sometimes, because those programs are not fully functional when you're opening files that way. So it looks like we've got 27 responses to our second poll. So let's see what people are saying. So I have a little cheat sheet here so I can remember what the questions were. So the most commonly agreed to answer for the first question is that many users have adopted chat with or without IT support. So that is probably a good thing, because you don't have to start by explaining why people should use chat and what the benefits of using chat are. So that can be helpful. Those of you who have very few people using chat, and those of you who have leaders who see chat or instant message as a time waster, have a whole different set of challenges, and you know what they are. So that will be interesting. The purple one, other. So I think if I click here, yeah, I thought if I clicked on it, it would give me a chance to see what people said about their other response, but I'm not going to get hung up on that right now. Okay, the next question we asked was, do your users easily work remotely? And almost half say we have a significant number of users who successfully work remotely. So that'll help as well, because those folks will see the benefits of Teams pretty readily, and hopefully be eager adopters for you. The next most frequent answer, though, was many of our leaders don't allow their employees to work remotely. So get ready for, I would say, some tension in, and I'm sure it's there already. It's only going to get worse. Those boomers, and I am one, so I can say this, who don't get it, who don't get
Dominic Torres
is now exiting.
Oh dear. Okay. So, people who don't get the benefits of working remotely or who are uncomfortable with it are going to be under some stress. And you might think about what you can do for those folks. Maybe some attempts to bring them together and talk about their concerns, show them how it really works, and give them examples of companies who are doing it successfully might be worth your while. And then the third question, what barriers are common within your organization? Um, a lot of people are saying that virtually all team communications is done via email. I have a great video. I didn't think to do it, but I can add it to the things I share with you. That talks about just a simple example of a person wants to make one decision. They have 4 people who they want to get to weigh in on it, and how many emails they generate back and forth in a relatively simple and very relatable circumstance. I think they ended up generating something like 62 emails. And when you could have on a collaboration platform, and this isn't a Microsoft video, this is saying any collaboration platform is better than that. And I certainly agree. So I think if you are one of these organizations where virtually everything is happening via email, see that as an opportunity, because people are frustrated with that. It just goes with the territory. The next most common response was, our teams are effectively using collaboration platforms, but it's not Microsoft Teams. So that's interesting. I have a 30-something daughter who works for an organization that uses the Google tools. I think they use Slack for collaboration as well, and they're perfectly happy with it. And so what we need to do is to make sure people understand the benefit of using a supported tool, and those messages are there. We just need to find them and address them, rather than just hoping that people will cooperate, because they won't a lot of times. And if you turn things off for folks, then you're creating kind of an adversarial, unhappy situation as well. So clearly we got people all over the map today, and some of you are going to find things a little easier than others, and that's the way of the world. But at least you know where your challenges are, and that's where you want to focus your efforts. So let's move on and talk about. I started out with 5 recommendations. I ended up throwing out a couple and adding a bunch more in. These are the 7 things that I think will be relevant to everyone on the call. And they all come after the 8th thing, which is what we've been talking about up until now, and that is embracing a change management methodology. So, that goes without saying almost, although I have been saying it now for some minutes. But, adopting a strategy, a structured approach is really important, because this effort requires discipline. It's easy to start implementing tactics and forget, that you actually would be better off if you were working from a strategy. And that's the last thing you want to do, because everybody has ideas. Executives will come in and have ideas for tactics that in and of themselves aren't bad, but if they don't fit into your strategy, they can really dilute your energy and your resources. So we want to avoid that. So embrace a methodology, develop a strategy, and then consider these 7 ideas as part of that. Number 1, and if you've been reading the Microsoft recommendations on Teams adoption, this is not a new concept. They really believe in this idea of developing a cadre of champions to help you kind of infuse the organization with some enthusiastic users. And we think it's a great idea as well. There are as many ways to go about this as there are organizations out there, I'm sure. But identifying and recruiting some early adopters, getting them to talk to you, organizing them so that you know what they're running into. For example, Patrick's Patrick's comment about people being frustrated with using the tab key inside of Excel, a champions group that's got themselves, you know, if you have helped them by setting them up with a team in Teams, they can help each other solve problems like that and end up helping the whole organization. Our second recommendation is to assess your culture, to really look at where you stand in terms of collaboration. And this goes beyond the audience assessment tool that we looked at earlier. This is ideally, and the way we like to do it is to go out and do what you see here on the slide. We like to talk to people in small groups, groups of people that represent different areas of the company. You can invite your champions to participate in these groups, but it also, you know, you also want to be talking to people who are not early adopters, but you want to be finding out what their concerns are and what their reactions are to some of the ideas that that you have about teams, and see how they react to them. I think for any size organization, if you do a half a dozen of these, you will be well on your way. You may decide that you need to do a lot more than that, but I really think even in a huge organization, if you choose your kind of target audiences well, you don't need to talk to a ton of people to get a good handle on what folks are saying. But my advice about, so these are really focus groups, okay? And my advice about how to do them effectively, first of all, don't let your groups get too big. You know, never invite more than 20 people, and really hope for about 12 people to show up. That's an ideal size. And have a discussion guide and stick with it. And the reason I say that is that will give you input that you can aggregate. If you do 6 of these and let the discussion go wherever it will, and then come back and try to write a report for senior leaders to tell them why you need more resources or why you need less resources, whatever. It'll be very difficult to aggregate that input. But if you ask each group the same questions, then it will be much easier and much more valid to add all that together into a pretty clear picture about where things stand in your organization. Oh, one other thing I was going to say about the focus groups is if you work for a company that has a communications department, see if you can't enlist their support. They've probably got people, or your marketing department for that matter, probably has people with a lot of experience doing focus groups, and that can be really helpful. Okay, this next recommendation is use free stuff. So you didn't need us to tell you that, right? But what you might not have known is about this particular link. So this is a great site. Actually, I guess I'll just go there so that we can scroll down and see the whole page. It has adoption guides for some of the key Microsoft platforms. The Teams adoption guide is this flip book. You can download this, or obviously you can just look through it here on the browser. there's good stuff in here. Most of you maybe have seen it already, but I find that I try to go back to this once every month or 6 weeks just to remind myself of some of the good ideas and some of the good resources that are contained here. So one thing that we were kind of excited about, I don't know who ended up joining today, but I know we had a couple people from government agencies who were signed up. This is new. We now have a government flip book. So if you're working in a government organization, this is a new resource for you, and they have their own set of challenges working inside GCC tenants. So anyhow, by all means, you know, take note of this this bookmark, and I'll go back to the PowerPoint. It's just resources.techcommunity.microsoft.com/adoption, and take a look at what's there. I think you'll find it very worthwhile. Okay, the next recommendation. So almost everybody introduces teams with pilot groups, and that's another in all of the Microsoft adoption material. You'll see that they recommend starting with pilot groups, and you know, we've been using pilot implementations of technology forever, so we didn't really need it's not a new idea. But one thing that that we've discovered is really important is really make an effort to be diverse with those groups. If you only pilot with IT people, for example, you're definitely going to have a different experience than you are if you're piloting with more diverse groups. So you've probably already got some pilots underway. Your project team probably has a team. When you establish your champions, you know, it's a pretty obvious idea to set them up with a team, but also, you know, reach out into your organization and find some other less tech savvy, maybe groups of people to involve in pilots, because you'll learn a lot from them as well. Next, I get to debunk a common truism that I've heard so many times over the years. Everybody thinks that it's been a proven fact that people want to get information about change from their immediate supervisor. And the truth is that the people do want to hear from their immediate supervisor when it's about, you know, what do you want me to do? How is this going to affect me directly? But people also need, especially when it's a big change like teams, people need to know why. And the immediate supervisor is usually not the best person to answer that question. Usually the best person to answer that question is a decision maker in the organization. So keep that in mind. And this, of course, goes back to what we were saying earlier about the importance of executive involvement and executive sponsorship for the team's implementation. Use those senior folks to talk very plain English about why they think the organization needs to embrace teams. And once people hear it from that level, then you would be surprised how what a big impact that can have, and it can really help to reduce resistance. Number 6 is to deploy a relatively new Microsoft resource called Learning Pathways. And this is, if you haven't had a look at this yet, it's pretty exciting. I know that there's one big employer in Northeast Ohio who has a staff of 8 or 9 people that work on developing and curating training content for Office 365. I think that most of us are not going to be lucky enough to have those kind of resources at our disposal. And learning pathways is definitely the next best thing. It's training content for Microsoft 365 that is curated by Microsoft, but it lives in your tenant. You deploy it or provision it, excuse me, you provision it in SharePoint, but Microsoft feeds the content so that it's kept up to date. And we've been working with this for a couple of months now, and we've seen a lot of improvement and a lot of tweaks and changes in that time. They're really, they're working on this to make it really great. So the way it works is you can deploy it just like this. So it's like a SharePoint site, and you can deploy the whole site. So what you're looking at here is the home page for the full site, but you can also deploy it in such a way that you don't, even if your intranet isn't on SharePoint, you can still link to, like, so there's a page of training for Teams, for example, and you can link to that page from any website so that your people can find, you know, a dozen or so videos and other content on Teams training that is always going to be current. It's going to feature the new features, and all you had to really do was turn it on. So we think it's a brilliant solution to, you know, a deluge of information. And then our final recommendation is to establish a center of excellence for collaboration. And this is to think about like the reinforcement phase of your change, right? So you've got a project team, there's a lot of energy, you're getting a lot of support maybe from Microsoft or Microsoft partners, and you've got a core team and your champions are excited, but Teams is here to stay, and I think that's pretty clear from the way it's been engineered and the way it interfaces with all of the other Office 365 tools. But it needs somebody, and several somebodies, keeping an eye on developments in order to keep it up to date, to make sure that security is being reviewed, to make sure that the latest and greatest capabilities are being fully you know, rolled out in your organization. And communications is only part of that. So so we recommend that you know, not do it as an afterthought, but do it going in, knowing that the implementation team may have a beginning, middle, and end, but supporting collaboration is something that really should never end in your organization. So finally, we get to the part where I stop talking quite so much, and we ask you to tell us what's on your mind, maybe things that we have touched on that you'd like to talk about a little more, or maybe there's things that you hoped we would talk about that we didn't get to that you'd like to bring up. So feel free to type into the chat or just take yourself off mute and let us know what's on your mind. One thing I'd ask, and that is, has anybody had to go out, or did anyone decide to go out and actively recruit an executive sponsor? Was there anyone who was successful at finding a sponsor when the executives weren't necessarily engaged from the beginning? Would love to hear how that went and how you did it. Also love to hear from anyone who has embraced the idea of establishing a group of champions. I'd like to hear how you went about that, because as I mentioned earlier, there are a lot of different ways to do it. Jared Johnson says the only issue we have with Teams is that it's as though Microsoft wants it to be a free for all service that lets anyone create them with no governance. We've implemented a solution.
Unknown participant is now exiting.
But it seems awkward. Yeah, we've seen other organizations struggling with the same thing. We're actually have developed a provisioning, an automate,
Gary Charavelli
is now exiting.
trying to automate the provisioning process so that you can maintain some control. Amy says they have an IT advisory committee made up of different types of employees that they pilot with. That's a great idea, Amy. Will the recording be sent to us? We could do that, I think. We can send a link to the recording. I also, if you're interested, I can share the templates that I just showed you, the one page of the change management plan template. Can share that with you. Here's another question. What do you do about users who want email notification for every team conversation? They can actually set their settings so that they get that. At least that's been my experience. I have Teams running all the time, and I don't get that many email notifications because I tend to see them when they pop up in Teams. But if I miss them, or if it's a day I was off or whatever, I'm happy to get
Unknown
those emails.
participant is now joining.
So that's just a setting. Our main concerns have been, this is Stephen says, our main concerns have been around security, being able to audit users from an HR perspective. There are a lot of security considerations in that adoption flip book on the back page where it had links to other resources. There's a flip book on security, Stephen, that you might want to take a look at. It might address some of your concerns. Bennett Adelson has some folks with some really solid expertise around that as well, if you'd like to have a conversation. Yes, Tally, I'm probably, I can't tell what's a first and last name here, but anyhow, yes, I will share my template. Great, and Barry says as well he would find that useful. Jared says our company implemented a form through our help desk software that automatically notifies the group that can create the team with our own naming convention. Perfect. We track the site info in a SharePoint list. Perfect. Bare bones, but it's working. That's great. That's very much in alignment with the approach we're taking with our clients. And right, you know, some organizations are comfortable with people, you know, being able to launch new teams and aren't concerned about naming conventions and so forth. And other organizations have been down that road and really don't want to go down that road again. So we hear you. This Colin says we don't have a separate PMO, so anything software related falls under IT. This results in the CIO to ending up being the executive sponsor. We still try to go outside of IT to find a co-sponsor, but aren't always successful. So yeah, I think it depends on your organization. I think Teams wants an executive sponsor that's a little broader. Like one prime suspect might be the SVP for HR, because it's such a a teamwork oriented thing, and it really affects the culture in the organization. And if you can go to your head of HR and explain that that's why you want them on board, you might have some success. Jared says he's got 7,000 plus users and didn't want to worry about 100 teams with the name test. Yeah, I could see that would be irritating for sure, Jared. Okay. Oh, I forgot. Tim's going to kill me. I have a slide of Bennett Adelson contacts. If you are interested in talking to us about anything Teams related or M365 related, we'd love to hear from you. Here are phone numbers and email addresses, and this will be in the deck when we send that out as well. So, okay, well, I think it's 4 o'clock, so
Judi,
oh,
Judi,
go
let
ahead,
me
Tim.
just quickly add, for those of you who are still on, we will post a recording and slides on the Bennett Adelson website within the next 48 hours. And for those of you who did attend, you'll get an email with a link to that as well. But they'll be out there. If you don't see the email for whatever reason, they'll be out on the website sometime in the next 48 hours. But we'll send you a reminder with a convenient link to it as well. So, Judi, thank you for the presentation today. Did a great job, and we appreciate everybody coming, presenting, or participating in the surveys and the feedback. And we look forward to providing some more seminars and webinars like this in the near future, as this is part of our monthly series. So keep an eye out for additional sessions on a number of different Microsoft solutions. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Tim, and thanks, everybody. We're going to sign off now.
Thanks all. Bye-bye.